everybody. And I would love to welcome also to join me, Wooni, Adora, and Niels. And as we're getting set up, a little round of applause, of course. And just to get to know our audience a little bit, a raise of hand if you are a founder. Okay, raise a hand if you are part of the Gen Z generation. Okay, interesting. And for those who are founders, raise a hand if you started your company before the age of 25. Okay, all right, cool. So I think we have a lot of people that align a little bit with what we're going to talk about today. I hope you're feeling included all the way over there.
I do.
It's always for the camera, of course. So yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Madeline. In this panel, we're going to explore the new generation of founders. We're going to get critical. We're going to have some fun. We're going to get personal. We're going to talk about the optics of power and age. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome, about being underestimated, about lived experience. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce a little bit of our panel. We've got Adora. She is the founder of Amaka, which is a social publishing platform that empowers millennial and Gen Z Pan-African creators to monetize and reach a global audience. This is the longest sentence I've ever spoken in my life. We've got Wooni, the founder of Yamuntu, which is a social commerce platform loved by Gen Z for the authentic and community-driven product recommendations. And we've got Niels, the 23-year-old, excuse me. I'm getting the
Big
German
difference
stuff,
of the generation.
Powerhouse behind Bling, which is Europe's first family fintech on the mission to make money a family thing. And I believe Bling is your fourth company? I know this so well because I've invested in him. And I've said your names, I've said the companies that you've founded. Why don't we go to the beginning and talk us a little bit through the moment that you decided there's a problem and the only way that I can solve it is by starting a company. Open floor, who wants to start?
I guess I can go. Thank you so much, Madeline. Really appreciate it. So for me, the whole point of Amaka was to really focus on the issues around representation, amplification, and monetization, specifically for diverse creators, specifically across Africa and across the diaspora. Established in 2020, which I'm sure a lot of people know, there was a really strong discourse and resurgence specifically on Black Lives Matter and specifically focusing on identity and marginalized identities and communities. And there were a lot of issues around misinformation, misrepresentation of our stories and communities. And so there was a deep frustration that I felt. And also, even though there are existing creator platforms, it was difficult for a lot of Africa-based creators to monetize their work and have autonomy over their work. So I'd say, the political, social climate, the context, speaking with different users, it was a very clear, there was this clear frustration and anger within the community to really want to drive home the problem. So that's what started for me.
Yeah. And yourself, Wooni?
I think for me it was purely curiosity. So I started back then doing surveys, asking people if they would use such a product.
Yeah.
Then I built a website to see if people are really interested in it. And I think it took me a while to understand that this could be a company and that you could earn money with it and that you could do a lot of stuff with it. So I think I never woke up and decided that I want to be an entrepreneur. It just happened somehow because I was just really into this. And at a certain point, I wanted this to be real, to use it, to see it. And this is how I would say my journey happened somehow.
Okay, slightly different than curiosity versus a very clear, pressing, immediate issue. And yourself, Niels?
I think for me it was frustration a bit. After I was a kids TV host in the age of 10 in Switzerland, I was invited quite often to corporate events, speaking about my generation, what I would do if I would be them. I had a lot of ideas, and I figured out they like to hear about these ideas, but they don't trust a 14-year-old to give them kind of 50K as a budget. So I started Tides, which is today Switzerland's largest newspaper, school newspaper, the first one in the App Store, to give my generation a voice and to actually have a field to explore new ideas and to do it by myself because no one else would have let me do it.
And so let's face the issue right in the head. Speak to me about speak to us rather, about the relationship that you have with your age. I think we're 23, we're 24, we're 27, we're 26. Do you see your age as a strength? Do you see it as a liability? Do you see it as something that you wish to hide? How do you go about being a founder, leading your company, and being the age that you are?
Okay. So I think for me, because I started Amaka at 24, I think at the start, I really wanted to find ways to avoid talking about my age, specifically because I felt like there was just this view of, obviously, there is the inexperienced part. I've never managed a team before. And so obviously you wanted to kind of avoid any doubts when it comes to investors, when it comes to clients, even comes to recruiting team members. But I suddenly quickly realized that it was an interest, it was a strength as well. It was the ability to, start fresh, be incredibly agile as well. But I think it was also like, we're talking a lot about intersectionality in the investment world as well. So my age, being a woman and being Black as well, I think there were things I was, hyper aware of, but also said, I also represent my community and my target consumers look like me, so why don't I lean into that? And I'm the only one that can solve that problem. And I think that's what a lot of people, whether it's investors, clients, team members, felt that, I was able to lean into that identity. Yeah.
And how far in your journey, so from 24, did you start saying, I'm going to lead with my age? Or I'll be open with it?
If I'm honest with you, it's probably this past year.
Okay. Happy birthday.
We're more comfortable doing that.
Yeah. I actually had to recently update it on my LinkedIn. It still said 25, and I was like, oh man, like the back problems are kicking in. Got to make it 26 now. And yourself, Wooni, Niels?
So I think I'm really used to be the youngest person in a room. I was, I think, the youngest room at the age of 10 when I wanted to be in television. I was the youngest one with 15 when I started Ties. I was now the youngest person in the room who wanted to start a fintech in the age of 20. So you always are a bit underestimated, of course, but at some point you learn to play with that and use this as an advantage for yourself. It will become an interesting experience when at some point I won't be the youngest person anymore in the room.
You're not. Our hostess is 17 years old.
Yeah, I realized.
Hey, that's
so
wild.
And the good thing, I switched the industry a bit from media to entertainment to now fintech, and the banking sector is really old. So I'm optimistic that I'm a bit the younger person for quite a time now.
And for the audience, I remember when, Niels, you came back from Money 2020. It's like a very big, fancy financial conference in Amsterdam. And you're like, yeah, people kept thinking I was the intern. And they kept asking for my boss's contact details. And I was like, that is too good. And what's your response to them when they say that?
Yeah, sometimes when I'm not really interested in them, it's actually quite nice because then they're not annoying you that much. I also had a sales visit once in our office where they thought I would be just associate, and I wasn't also really interested, so I never lived the secret about that. So I just played it through. But I think in general, it's what I said. It's the feeling of being underestimated all the time, and it's also a bit unfortunate because when I think about our other young team members, I don't want to be them underestimated just because their title as well. So even if you're just an intern or an associate, you should be on an eye level with the other people's, I think. Yeah.
And Wooni, I mean, you are also building for a community that is your age or our age. Was that something that you would always lean into your age? You would always lead with that? Or what's been your relationship as well?
I think it always depends on my state of mind. So when I was feeling strong, I was myself. Age was never a problem, and I think most of the time I even used it benefit. So I remember outreaching to all our potential partners, investors, and telling them, hey, I'm Wooni, I'm 19 back then, or 20 or whatever. And I always perceive it something where people are open to support, help. But I also remember moments where I enter a room and I feel like, okay, should I be here because I'm only, 19? And also often of the time, people just thought I'm still 40 or something. And I was like, oh, okay. So that means if I behave a certain way and I'm confident it doesn't change anything, it's in my mind. And also telling a true story also when our fundraising was super hard, I was telling myself the story, it's because I'm young, right? So you sometimes always find the story that pleases you the most. But in general, I always perceive it as a benefit or USP because people remember you because you're the youngest person in the room or whatever. And also with our application, I think it's just a something natural, that at a certain point you know the trend, you define the trend, and now we are speaking about Gen Alpha, and I don't feel like that I understand everything that's happening in TikTok, and even though I'm building a social network, I'm not on TikTok that much.
Yeah.
So I'm super grateful having people in our team that knows the stuff, and I think that's also how stuff should be, that I should not expect that I will always know how things are authentically, but that I can rely on other people and let them help.
Is that an experience that either of you have had, this feeling of walking into a room and thinking, should I be here? Or thinking, I really don't know. I mean, maybe it's a bit of imposter syndrome. I don't know what the word is. I think maybe we've all felt that a little bit. But yeah, when's the last time you really walked into somewhere thinking like, ooh, I'm out of my depth here? And what did you do about that?
Yeah, for me, I think imposter syndrome definitely was something that I had to work on and overcome. But I think it was, again, something that I felt was really important was that acknowledging and accepting that I don't know everything, and I'm not expected to really know everything because I just started, but I need to, but I am hardworking enough or intelligent enough to know what I don't know or who I need, or maybe to even ask people who have a lot more experience to really advise and say like, okay, like this is the vision, this is the team structure, like what kind of person do I need, how many years of experience, and really empowering those around me to kind of support and execute the vision. So I'd really say like, yes, there was that imposter syndrome, but I think what I felt was a strength was there's a skill and a really strong self-awareness with not knowing, and utilizing that power to be able to have someone execute it for you and better as well.
Niels, I mean, I've seen you negotiate your way through some of the, the largest heads of Dutch, German banks.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when you're in this room with all these board members of these big traditional banks, it's a bit of a culture shock, of course, but that's exactly what points Bling out. That's why we make things different, and I think they see this, and that's why they are coming to our office and want to see this. So it's actually in a strong position that we normally are, and at the beginning, of course, when we search our first banking partner, it's just about presenting them a legit business plan, finding ways to build an interesting business model around that, and then it's more a track record presentation rather than a generation about yourself, right? So then the numbers, the track record speaks for itself, and that's where I want to build this company, Bling2, together with my co-founder Leon and the whole team, that we are not identified by the age of the founders, but because of the track record that we have, because of the impact at the generation, at the families in Germany that we have, that we can accompany.
Yeah, I think that's...
Sorry,
Go for it.
If I can add one point, I think sometimes I also observe that I'm super arrogant in big rooms. And what I mean with that is like I was invited to a marketing event 1 month, 6 weeks ago, and I was at the entrance and everybody was dressed super classic, I would say some older people, and I was observing myself thinking like, what am I doing here? What could I possibly learn from these old marketing people?
They didn't like your tie-dye socks and your North Face slippers?
Yes, so do they even know like how modern marketing should look like? So I would also observe that sometimes there's a lot of arrogance, and I left this event with a lot of gratitude because I was like, wow, like I got so much inspiration from these people, and I was just admiring their work much more. So I think it can go in both directions, that we are not only like doubting ourselves, but sometimes also overconfident because of our age.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my my siblings would agree with that, at least how I can be. And I think the next topic is really related to this, and something that I'm really interested to know, because I feel I've been in a different position. Like I started in investment at 20, and that's a different position of power, right? Because then you're in a position of holding capital, right? And also being in a position of, I guess, analyses and evaluation. And I remember being in some calls, and the guy, most of them are guys, right? And they'd be like, I've been working in this field for 40 years. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like twice my age. You know, like who am I to evaluate if they know or don't, or if this is a good position? And then it was just this weird dance of like, I have a weird power position, you have an expertise, and I felt very weird in that dynamic for a while. And now I think it's covered where it's like, I'm never gonna know as much as you know. So let's have a very equal relationship in this, more transactional, right? But you are in the position where you have to be, let's say, the boss, or maybe that's a bit of an, it's 2023, the manager, the leader of people who are significantly older than you, or investors who are significantly older than you, where you have to be in the position of power and leadership. What's it like being the boss of someone, of a team, or of people that are, twice or more than your age?
I think as a founder, you're exactly searching for this kind of people that have more experience in certain fields. You want to have the best people around you. You want to have people you can learn from, and that's how you want to build a team. So it's actually something that I definitely appreciate, and something that I'm really excited to work with these people, because I like to be I like to be the dumbest person in the room from certain topics. That's why I have a team, right? And that's why it's not a one-man show.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo your point, I think I really lean into it. I get really excited about it. I mean, we have someone on our team, when we work on production, branded content for brands, like she's worked at over 20 years in Ogilvy, she's in her 50s, but we just she understands, what we're looking to do and build. The fact that she moved away from such, a reputable, strong company to work at a startup to really build that infrastructure and to lean into someone that has that knowledge and understanding. But also what I love and appreciate that it's a two-way street. Like, she's also learning from me and I'm also learning from her. And across different members of the team as well, whether they're millennials or older, I think it's just about having the shared mission and understanding and working together on that output. Yeah.
I had a lot of respect and fear.
Respect and fear?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Having all the people in the team, because I felt like that's a lot of responsibility. They could do different things. They have a track record, and I always have been scared to waste their time or take bad decisions and impact their life a certain way. But I also realized after a certain time that none of them is joining the team. If I am speaking about team member, if they would not trust me and if they would not see something in me, and I think then the next step was for me, okay, I'm actually doing my job if I also have a certain confidence in myself and go for the things, and if I'm not too passive because they trust me, and I should also, just live that.
That's exactly the point with the track record, right? When you're 20-year-old, you want to start a fintech, you're searching people around, you're the 20-year-old guy who want to start a fintech. And when you're speaking to 50-year-olds who are working in the industry for a long time, they are really skeptical about that. It's much easier when you have the track record. And that's what I appreciate about our current growth at Blink, that we can use them, they are coming to us, and hiring got much, much easier with the track record.
Yeah, I think age is, time is the one thing that will always be fleeting, right? And something that I've recognized is you were sort of recognized for your achievements because of, in the context of your age. At this age, they did that, but it's significantly less impressive at a later age. And then your success needs to be defined by hard proof, because that narrative, that sort of shininess wears off. Is that something you're feeling? Is that something that's huge fear that I've had, where I'm like the story, like the headlines that 20-year-old investors making rich men richer, like that's gone now. Like, we got to have returns for your shareholders now. What pressure do you feel, and how do you feel that the narrative and the way that you are maybe defined as successful or feel success is changing with the passing of time? God, that's really poetic. Can I say that about my own question?
I can start on this one. Yes, I think, as you mentioned it, I only feel like I have maybe 2 or 3 more years where I can write you guys on LinkedIn and tell you my age, and you will be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I think after, I don't know, maybe 4 years will not be that relevant anymore. And I'm also always asking myself if I can keep up with my personal growth, can keep up with the age, because I also have certain expectations from myself. If you start a company with 19, to say, okay, where do I stand with 28? But I think that's more also ego thing. while I'm saying it, that doesn't matter honestly where I stand with 28. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, before starting Amaka, I was obsessed with success and achievement at such a young age, and I think it was just a product of my environment or how I grew up, or even in social media as well. Like, you know, everyone obviously shows the greatest parts of their careers and communities, and also when you're young, you have young, for example, content creators making millions. So I think it was just like this strange obsession. But obviously, as I kind of grew into the role, I think for me, I'm just really care more about like sustainable long-term growth. Like even if I'm not successful before a certain age or whatever, I personally feel that it's the result and the impact that I'm looking to do more than honestly being under Forbes under 30. Like I just think it's a vanity metric at the end of the day, and I think there are bigger opportunities and opportunities for growth and impact. In my opinion, yeah.
But I mean, if you do want to be, on the headlines for fraud and being jailed, I mean, Forbes 30 under 30 is a great way to start. I believe we've got one right here, Niels. And how would you say your relationship between sort of success and age versus track record and needing to show proof and metrics, how has that changed? Maybe what does success look like to you?
So first of all, I'm a big fan of storytelling, and I really like to use storytelling to get free attention and free media coverage for my company. So of course we are playing the story about the 20-year-old that started this pocket money card and app. We are playing that, and it worked well, but it was a great entry point, and we will see how it goes. For example, at Bling we hired a child executive officer. She is 12 years old, a Gen Alpha member. She shares her thoughts on LinkedIn, so you can follow her, and she is at our office once a month and gives her insights. This is how at some point maybe she will replace me from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, and maybe we should change gears. We've gone really into the relationship with age. Maybe we could talk more generally about our perspectives, what you feel about certain topics. And the one that just keeps coming up is Gen Z doesn't want to work. I believe Kim Kardashian was like, nobody wants to work these days. Where does that come from? Do you believe it? Do you not? Why is the only thing I hear?
So it definitely comes not from our office, because we have a lot of Gen Z and we are working a lot.
As your investor, that's very good to hear.
We are working for your money. We make it more. And we try to do our best. But
I have returns that I need to make, okay, Niels?
Great, yeah, absolutely. So, but it's a team effort, and our team has a lot of Gen Z. I would say 50% are Gen Z, even maybe a bit more, because as a Gen Z, you also attract more Gen Zs to join your team, which is a great thing, I think, for Bling, especially given the different target groups we are going to address, or we are addressing. Of course, I see that they are working the same way, but they want to have more flexibility. They want to have open communication. For me, it's pretty easy to fulfill because I'm as well a Gen Z. But I can imagine that it gets some conflicts potentially when you're actually an older person and someone is asking you for a vacation for two weeks in Indonesia, 3 weeks before the vacation is happening. It's a bit of more flexibility, but I mean, our generation grew up with more flexibility. It's something I appreciate. I think it's something that allows us to do our stuff. And it's clear that people who are joining your team, who could join every team possible, I think hiring is something pretty difficult at this time. Of course, they have flexibility requests, and we need to fulfill them.
Why does nobody want to work these days? Or why do they?
I mean, I feel like, first of all, that's obviously not true. I think what I really admire about Gen Zers is like boundaries. It's like it's a huge thing, and I feel like I'm on the cusp of the millennial and Gen Z. So I understand, like, there were these conversations around millennials where it was like, you kind of have to work over a certain time, overcommit, etc. Whereas, Gen Zers, even with my younger sisters, there's like, well, I'm putting in my time, but at this time, please don't expect me to be here afterwards. I don't think it's about not wanting to work. I think it's just more about boundaries. And then I think from an Amaka perspective as well, like we a lot of our community, we service like a lot of Gen Zers, a lot of content creators, especially across Africa, like under 70, about 70% of Africa's population are under 30. And they're hustlers, they're striving and working, and sometimes it's mainly because they can't rely on certain infrastructure and government institutions, and so kind of look to digital ecosystems. And so they're really building a name for themselves, looking to be able to build a lot of their own careers and uplift their own communities without the support of government institutions as well. And they're super young and super driven. So with the community that we service and the users that we service, it's not true at all.
70% under 30?
70%.
Wow.
42% of the world's global youth population will be in Africa.
Wow.
So in 2030. So it's a huge opportunity and growth market as well. So I think people need to be able to look at how do I connect better with them as well.
Yeah. Maybe to branch into that,
Yeah.
because you're based in London.
So so Africa. So we are based in London, but we have team members in Johannesburg and Cape Town and Lagos as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And do you see within your team members, maybe those that are under 30 or in the Gen Z, a difference between those based in London versus in your offices across Africa?
That's really interesting. I mean, obviously there is a difference in terms of, again, like, the opportunities and infrastructure as well. I think there's perhaps a little bit more exposure when it comes, especially in the creative ecosystem. The creative economy and ecosystem is still quite in its nascent stage. It's growing rapidly, but I think the infrastructure, obviously, in the Western world has a lot more of that structure. So there's a bit more of that exposure, but I still think there's still similarities in terms of being very driven and wanting to be able to have a strong autonomy over their narratives and storytelling, and also wanting to be in specific spaces as well. So I think those are the differences as well as similarities as well.
Yeah. So we've had autonomy, we've had boundaries, we've had flexibility. Wuni, what do you think when you hear Gen Z doesn't want to work?
I think we just have bigger gaps and more extremes. And what I mean with that is like we have crazy possibilities. So for example, I'm sitting here is not because I'm much smarter and much more driven than all the other people before me or whatever. It's just because I can build up on technologies, different possibilities. And I think my favorite example for myself is like my dad, who has like 2 diplomas, I don't know how to say it, 2 degrees, and he never had the opportunities to do the jobs he wanted to do. And at a certain point, I was sitting in meetings and with, investors and telling them, you know what, I'm not taking the money because I'm not feeling the vibe. So I think I think
The vibes were off.
We cannot compare, to be honest, right? I would not also compare me with the next generation, and I think it's also not a battle or whatever. It's just like, at the end of the day, I'm grateful for the stuff that's given now, and I think it's also not healthy for people to compare and ask why. Like, you hear this often, if I would have done this at my age, maybe you would still have not the same results because you don't have the resources and infrastructure.
Yeah, I would love to get into actually comparing the resources and opportunities at hand to founders starting now versus founders starting later, and maybe even the next gen. But before I do so, I want to maybe take a risky show of hands. On the topic of Gen Z doesn't want to work, for the founders or people who employ employees who are Gen Z or younger, show of hands if you think there's some truth to that Gen Z doesn't want to work. 2 hands, 3 hands. I appreciate your bravery, and I would love to talk about that. Okay, going into, we talked a little bit about this in our pre-call, where there's this really interesting juxtaposition with, from a founder versus an individual. From a founder, it feels like today you have more resources and opportunities at hand to start a company. The threshold to start a company is much lower. The access to capital in the past years has been unheard of when it comes to the off-the-shelf technology, when it comes to the ability to have flexible workforces. Like the opportunity to start a company and be successful in that time frame seems so much shorter, so much riper. But on the other hand, as an individual, as maybe as a citizen or a member of whatever, we are also facing this position where we're the generation that will probably never see the level of economic growth or prosperity as our parents, speaking in the Western sense. And that our opportunity to buy a home is lower than any other generation, right? So you have, at the founder level, it's like, this is the time. But at the citizen level, you're, screwed, shall we say. I'm trying to censor my language here. How do you think about that? Do you think about that? What's your experience as a founder versus maybe in your peers and your community? Just a tiny little baby question.
I would say I'm ignorant about that because my private self don't really exist at the moment. So for me, it's right now only my startup and chilling with my friends. And if I chill with my friends, we don't talk about buying houses. So maybe you.
Oh man, I have like 2 glasses of wine and I rant about the great generational transfer of wealth. I'm fun at parties.
For me, it's a little bit like being in a candy store at the current time. So we have so many possibilities that we can grab social media, attention, organic growth, just by pushing out videos that before that we would need to address TV and TV stations. So it would be much more complex, at the same time having as much growth capital around VCs that no generation has ever before. It's more about the focus thing, and having all these possibilities maybe be a bit more complex from time to time, but at the end of the day, it's really exciting.
I think when we were discussing in our pre-call, I think maybe we can look at, for example, the current landscape when it comes to fundraising right now. It's very challenging, and I think it will start having an impact on younger founders as well. And I think it also ties into kind of your question about kind of like the personal wealth as well. Although yes, there was and still is, opportunities to have that access to capital. I think that in deploying it, and I'm sure you'll have more insights on that, is a lot harder and a lot more selective. So I think maybe when it comes to the kind of personal wealth and income, I think maybe they're starting to come at par with what it's like being a founder, as well as trying to have like more of a financial sustainable life. Outside of that, I think they're both becoming harder, especially in this social and political and economic climate as well. But again, I probably don't have as much information as you do, so maybe good to hear as well on your thoughts as well. Yeah.
On the changing access to capital? Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
We've only got 11 minutes left, so I don't. I could rant a lot about that. I think that the advantage that younger founders have, while you may lack the access to the networks that control capital, is that for most of us, we don't have as much dependencies and need for capital as, let's say, a founder that already has. Of course, you could be supporting families, and that's nothing that I know. But generally, if you look at that age bracket, you're probably single. You probably don't own a home because we can't. You don't therefore have a mortgage. You don't have children that you're putting through school. It could be that you're supporting your parents or already starting to. But our need for personal capital, our ability to be flexible, our ability to sort of like live in a 400 euro square, like a shared room with 5 other people, like we can kind of take that cut and take that risk. So I do think that the access to capital will change. I do think that we'll see the market bounce back a little bit, and I do think that we will see hopefully alternative forms of capital, not just venture and maybe not just an angel here or there. So I'm very positive, but also in now and in the low in the market, the one thing that we can kind of hold on to as being really young is we have time and we have flexibility and we can be really cheap, most of us at least. We've got around 10 minutes left, so I'd love to maybe go into what you've learned from your employees, from your team, what you've learned from your users, because a lot of us employ younger people or people of other ages, but also all of you are building for either the Gen Z generation a little bit. I know, I mean, Niels, you're building for the generation is
For many
not even
different
born.
generations, actually. We're building products for the parents that are ordering a pocket money card, for example, for their kids. But then the cards are actually used by the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha. So when we are doing product development, we are speaking with many generations. And that's why it's so important to me to have these generations represented within the team so that we can truly understand these different generations. And I'm excited because I think Bling is the company, one of the only fintechs that's actually thinking the growth path in generation, starting a household together, getting a first joint budget account, then planning the future, maybe planning a saving tree, how we call investment. At some point you get your child, and then the child wants to pay money independently and orders a Bling card. So we are thinking really at growing with a family through to multi-generations, and that's what I think makes generations so important to us, to also understand the different needs and expectations from these different generations.
And what have we learned, or maybe what do we still not understand about the new generation, maybe Gen Alpha, or maybe even the younger Gen Z, right? That you see in your user base, that you see maybe in the new sort of Gen Alpha creators that you're building for. I mean, Uni, you already sort of alluded to it, like what you see now with like even younger than us, you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know why this is popular. I don't know the lingo. What is for you the next unknown that you're already starting to see filter through in your user base or your teams?
I think for Amaka, I mean, I will say like a lot of our data is specifically still from Gen Zers. Obviously, Gen Alpha is obviously on the horizon and looking into that as well. But I think one of the main things is, I know that we've spoken about this so many times, but I think their use of AI as well. How are they using it? Like even for me, it's still, I'm young, but it's still kind of new. But it's also interesting to see how people in younger generations, especially when it comes to content creation, when it comes to productivity, like how are they going to be utilizing that? I don't have a lot of data just on that yet, but we are curious to kind of see how will that start to impact how people are showing up in the digital ecosystem, but then also how are they maybe accelerating their opportunities for monetization in the content creation space as well.
I have a data insight. Last week I realized that the Gen Alpha, so our pocket money card users, are using their card more for bubble tea than for coffee and other beverages. So there is a shift, and the data insight is Gen Alpha definitely likes bubble tea.
I mean, if a 9-year-old was coming up saying, I want to buy coffee, and I was a barista, I'd be like, I mean, I don't have children, but like, you're not supposed to drink caffeine when you're young, right? Is that?
No, I don't think so. No, but I'm now more focusing on the bubble tea. To be with the thing. I'm now a bubble tea expert.
Yeah.
I try to become.
And do you see anything? Because I know it's very sort of like Gen Z social commerce. Are you seeing that you're getting even younger users, different types of recommendations?
I would say we see, again, more and more extremes. So I think...
Extremes, okay.
Yeah, people can... I don't know how to describe this the best, but you can go in just more direction. You have the possibility to find communities easier. That means even if you're alone in your village, you don't need to dress like everybody there. You can still have your online communities that give you the strength to be the person you want to be. And I think this makes it also more difficult to say this is the one target group because it's splitting up more and more. And I think something else what we see is that people are looking for connections. So that's also what we are building on with Yamuntu, that people want to be part of brands, they want to define stories, and also that they love stories. And what I mean with that is that I think 80% of our users are recommending upcoming brands, so brands that have maybe 10,000 to 200,000 followers, and that, they love to create and also support new movements. Which is super exciting, because if we think about partnerships, it's less about the big brands, which we also work with, but it's for us also even more difficult to work with small upcoming brands because they know that they have power even though they're still small right now.
Maybe, do you have any advice for people in our audience or the people listening. So I think we've already touched on a few of these things. If you are to be hiring or catering to or marketing towards Gen Z users or Gen Z team members, I think the topic of being truly authentic, whatever that means, of being sure that you have the right storytelling, of this aspect of genuine connection, what would you say is your advice if you're trying to really effectively cater to and engage a Gen Z audience? What do you need to get right?
Definitely, I think authenticity, using that word can be a buzzword or superficial when there's being very intentional about it is what we've definitely seen, and also understanding the nuances of those identities as well, because we speak with to diverse audiences, diverse creators as well, and they absolutely hate it when they're grouped together when it comes to specific interests or when it comes to specific backgrounds. They love the idea of very niche subcultures, and someone that has taken the time and effort to understand how they communicate, how they speak in that kind of subculture language or environment as well. So I think really speaking to them, having that data, but then also, again, I think the nuances of their identities is something that I feel like is of great importance to them. Yeah.
Okay, so be informed, be intentional, and be nuanced, or appreciate that nuance. Wuni, Niels, any thoughts on this? Advice?
I would just say get support in your team. It's the same topic for us with Gen Alpha, and also, which is funny, we work with certain brands, and then they explain us the nice and crazy and fancy idea, and we just feel the word cringe, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think it's such an easy step. You don't need to hire a 14-year-old girl that get €100,000 salary, but you can start with a mini jobber or working student, so the barriers are really low, and just get support in the team and try to get a feeling for them, and also just get the feedback. I think it's sometimes even easier than speaking to external people.
Yeah. Niels, any thoughts on this?
I think communication is key. What I realize is that when I look at all the people, they're used to just do what they've been told. So we need to do this, and then they are sometimes not really agreeing with that, but they are like, okay, what a stupid boss I have, but I'm going to do it. And our generation really wants to understand why they are doing something, and so communication is key. They are asking the question, they want to understand why you're exactly doing that. So you need to explain way more. You need to over-communicate rather than under-communicate, and I think that's something that is also not only internally but externally. People want to understand what is this kind of product, who is behind this product. They're used to get faces to the products these days. They want to understand the story about that, and this is something we can outperform as well as a company, because we have this content, storytelling and communication competences in-house.
I'd love to add to that as well, because I think that's a really valid point, and it's something that we've started doing as well, as kind of doing these kind of town hall meetings with our users or, creators or consumers, every quarter. And it's been so insightful because sometimes, people can write emails, maybe they'll complain about a feature or they want this and that. But then when you actually have that FaceTime conversation with them, really taking the time to understand their concerns, and they do want to know who's the face behind the product as well. So I thought that was really helpful insight as well.
Yeah.
And
we have
also
40
adding
seconds
1 point.
left.
Sorry.
No, you can say it. You got to be on time.
I think people that ask questions are engaged, so that's what you're looking for. So just go for it and use the engagement and try the best, and then you have more engaged people.
Yeah. All right. I've never been over time on a panel, and I'm not going to start now. I was going to end with what is your one-word prediction that will define the next generation of founders, but I will instead thank you all for coming, and if you want to figure out their answers, you can find them afterwards. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. And thank you to the Lead Today, Shape Tomorrow team for everything, and I want to keep my little Britney Spears microphone. And with 1 second, we're done.
Thank you.